You're listening to The Artist Athlete, show number 2, sugar. I'm Shannon McKenna, and I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast. This podcast is dedicated to CIRCUS. It's a resource for those working in the industry to share our stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into our world. Ooh, sneak peek. I want to say before I start that I am just starting this podcast, so a lot of the equipment and other things I didn't know I needed when I did this interview. So the sound quality isn't great, but I promise I'm getting better. I'm learning all the time. And the contents of this interview are so good that I had to share it with you all. So today on the show, I have Aerialist and studio owner Liza Rose. She worked in Seattle running her own aerial dance company called TikTok, and she worked as a choreographer for the Acrobatic Conundrum. She was featured as an aerialist on American Horror Story Freak Show and has competed in the U.S. Aerial Championships, and she owns her own circus studio, Fly Circus Space LLC, in New Orleans. Welcome to The Artist Athlete, Liza Rose.
Thanks, I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. So I recorded this episode at the same time that I recorded Brett Copes's episode, and we're sitting in his living room, so there's some unwarranted commentary in the back, but this is about Liza Rose.
I'm the second person to be interviewed for your podcast, but I'm the first aerialist.
The first aerialist?
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Boom. So you're an aerialist now, but you started as a dancer,
That's
right?
True. Yeah, that's true about me.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about like your dance background?
Sure. I danced as a kid.
Contemporary, ballet?
Jazz.
What was your jazz?
Ballet.
I love it.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I sort of dropped out of it for a while until I went to college and decided I was gonna just take a contemporary class, and I ended up taking class from this woman in Austin, Texas named Darla Johnson, and she just changed everything for me. You know, she was very and still is to this day, very smart, very intuitive dancer and choreographer, and she just said, hey, forget all of that stuff that you learned before about how you have to be perfect and look perfect and have perfect technique, because if you can walk, you can dance. And then
I love that.
Then you start exploring from there. You know, and contemporary dance is all about exploring all the possibilities of the human body in space, but you can't do that unless you start there.
Sure.
Yeah.
This was the question I was going to ask at the very end, but it's such a natural... I probably shouldn't meta comment on my own podcast. But you wrote in your bio that you want to advance aerial movement beyond feats and tricks to a place that demands the fullest awareness of the body in performance.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm wondering, how does an aerial artist become more fully aware in their body aside from just the tricks or beyond the tricks?
I'm still trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the process has something to do with finding authentic movement in your own body and being able to perform that in front of people. Those are two very different things, but one doesn't make sense without the other. So I think what you do is you come to a place of technical mastery, and then you try to tell your stories. You try to tell your authentic stories in the moment, and you try to do that with your movement. And then you try to do that in front of people and communicate something authentic to them.
Do you have a technique or a process through which you find authentic movement or encourage your students to find authentic movement?
Yes, I do have a process by which I've learned to listen to my body and try to be more in touch with what it wants to say. I learned a lot of that from Darla Johnson. She actually has a book about it.
Oh, cool. What's the book called?
It's called The Art of Listening.
Okay. I'll put it in the show notes so people can look it up
and
too.
And I also have done a little bit of Stephanie Skura's open source forums, which is again about accessing authentic movement in your body. You put those practices on top of aerial, and it's a pretty difficult and nuanced thing. I'm still trying to do it. every time I perform, I'm still trying to do it. I'm trying to give the audience the experience of watching a performer who is themselves having the experience of performing instead of just watching a performer perform.
Right. Wow. That's pretty cool. Actually, that's really neat, because so often you see people who come from ballet or who've come from, so they've got these very nice lines, super traditional, super beautiful, and you can certainly say something with that as well.
Yeah.
But to be a performer and to be the performer, to be the only Liza Rose, you have to move authentically to yourself.
Yeah.
And so how much of your work do you find now, your own personal training time, if you ever get training time with everything else you do, is technically based or is athletic? And how much of it do you find, or do you dedicate to artistic movement or authentic movement or this process?
That's an interesting question. I feel like at this point in my life, I probably train about every other day, maybe 4 days a week or so. I train at least 3 hours, 4 hours during each one of those times. I start usually by doing whatever PT exercises I need to be doing.
Yeah, right. Do your PT.
I usually do my PT. I do what I need to do to sort of wake up my connections in my body, which sort of looks different from the day to day depending on how I'm feeling. And that might take half an hour to an hour. And then I'll get up on an apparatus, and I generally have just a few things that I'll run through to warm my body up on the apparatus, but then all the rest of that time is dedicated to finding transitions, finding story within the phrases that I'm working through, finding ways that I can make choices in the air instead of instead of my shapes looking like what I learned in class or what would be known as traditional. I try to spend a lot of time finding my points of contact, assessing what I need to engage in my body to stay up in the air and stay safe while I'm there, and then making choices with all the rest of my body. And that's my process of trying to create authentic movement.
And when you teach, I assume you teach, you run the studio, but you teach as well. Do you find what's your approach to teaching? Is it more authentically based or more from artistic, or do you go in through the tricks and the traditional kind of
it depends
templates?
On what the class is, sort of. Right now, I've been teaching a sling class, which I love. I love sling. It's the laziest aerial apparatus.
It really is. That's why you never see me on one.
And
I'm just like,
it's a very fun access point for students to begin to find their own authentic movement. Because it is what it is. Because it's a thing that literally holds you up in the air. And it's sort of kind of hard to fall off of it.
Yeah.
You know? It is a very fun place to start those students on that exploration, that sort of journey of finding their points of contact, finding what they need to keep themselves safe in the air, and then making choices with the rest of it. So I love my sling class. I also teach very theoretically. Like I've been teaching a rope class, and my rope curriculum is pretty cut and dried, pretty technical, and it starts with, learning how to climb, foot knots, hip keys, and, you sort of the first four basic wrap, foot knots, hip keys, catchers, and a figure eight. Mm-hmm. We don't even start doing S-locks until the second, until level 2.
Sure.
Anything. So I teach them those things, and then I just start teaching them ways to move in between those things.
Oh, cool.
That's
nice.
Pretty much it for level 1. So that's sort of my approach to teaching, which I think is the way that as an aerialist, as you grow and as you start seeking your own style, that's the way that you're going to be able to make your own style, is if you're able to assess your own personal safety and you're able to move in between these places of rest, these places that will keep you on the thing and safe.
Did you have any I know you talk about your dance teacher. Did you have any aerial teachers who kind of brought you into this way of thinking? Or is this something you arrived upon on your own?
I never had any aerial teachers who taught me in this way.
I've never had one either.
Nope.
Everybody's got the tricks, man.
The tricks. Yeah. Teaching or phrase work, like they might teach their own phrases. But then if you're a student who doesn't understand that you're in a hip key because you got into it in a different way than you had originally been taught, then you can't put it two and two together and figure out that teacher figured out that way to get into that hip key, and that was their own original movement. So like you're not going there.
Right. Sure.
So yeah, that's the way that I've been taught in the past.
So reading through your bio, internet stalking you're from Austin, and then you moved to Seattle, or was there some New York, LA dance?
There was so much in between
stuff. Where would you say the majority of your training happens? In the air.
Probably LA. I started out in New York. I learned a lot of trapeze in New York, and I learned some fabric in New York. And then I went to Los Angeles, and I continued learning fabric from 2 or 3 different people, and then kept learning trapeze there as well. I didn't even start learning rope until I was in Seattle, until I started learning from Terry and Yuka. And that was probably 6 years ago or so that I started on rope.
Is rope your preferred? You said you really like sling for the authentic movement quality.
I do.
Do you have a apparatus that you prefer to teach versus one you prefer to perform on?
No,
or are they all
nothing that I more prefer to teach. There's nothing at all, really. I don't really do straps. I don't really do a lot of Chinese pole. I wouldn't teach those things. I wouldn't feel qualified, but I've like the 4 main aerial apparatus, trapeze and rope and silks and lyra. I'll teach all those things and feel competent teaching all of those things. My favorite thing to perform on right now is a rope, but I don't really have a rope act. I've made a couple of rope acts and immediately discarded them because they were boring and I hated them. This is the reason that I'm so drawn to rope right now, because it's a really fun puzzle. I have this,
and there's a lot happening in the rope world.
I
feel like
there is. I think it's because it's a logical progression with Aerialist that's where you go eventually, because you kind of get bored with other apparatus. You tend to find your way to rope because it's the most challenging, and it seems like it's very limiting because it's just the one rope, and what the heck am I supposed to do on just this one rope? But really, the simplicity of it, the mathematics of it, the geometry of it, the physics of it, are so engaging on a sort of mental level that I think it keeps people
it keeps engaged and has that cerebral quality, so you can really start to think about what you're doing, not just do. Or
but
interesting.
Having said that, I don't really have a rope act that I love. If you asked me to perform a rope act right now, I would totally do that, but it wouldn't be a rope act that I.
Oh my god, it'd be so cool though. It would just be you in a hip key to some beautiful music, and you'd just be moving in your authentic way. I would love to see that.
Well, you can see it every month at I have this little show in Seattle that's called not in Seattle, I don't live there anymore, in New Orleans, called the Fly Movement Salon.
Oh, cool.
And it's basically an open mic night for contemporary circus artists. And I do a rope improv there almost every month.
Nice.
As part of my
How many performers do you usually have in this?
Anywhere from 6 to 10 or 12, depending on who wants to come and who shows up.
Are they mostly local, or do you get...
Yeah, they're mostly local, but whoever might be passing through town, whoever might be teaching at my studio at that moment, we usually get them in the mix as well. last month we had Alexander Knapp, who is a really fun.
Yeah. He's a juggler, right? Or
he
a manipulation artist.
Yeah, he's great. Town, so he performed in the salon. We have one tomorrow, actually, when I go back to New Orleans, and Sochi's going to be in town.
Oh,
so
nice.
She's going to perform in it. She's coming to teach at the studio.
Tell her I said hi. She was my roommate in San Francisco for a little while.
Neat.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe last month we also had Petra de la Rocha.
Nice.
From Portland. Yeah.
That's great. I constantly see posts or people looking for open stages or looking for opportunities to perform. Yeah. And the only one I really can think of that's monthly, I mean, I know the Muse does things sometimes, and El Circo Cheapo, which is now something else at a loss.
Sanctuary.
Yep. So it's neat to hear that you have one in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. What is the process of putting that on every month? Do you find it labor intensive? It seems you seem pretty chill about it.
No, it really is pretty chill. I'll send out an email and I'll ask locals in town, most of whom are already teaching or training at my studio, if they're in for the salon next month. I might ask some students. If we have students hanging around the studio who are ready, who I think are ready, I might ask them and say, like, hey, I think you're ready. You want to perform at the salon? I'll put them on stage. And I'll...
Oh, man, I can totally see myself as, like, a beginning aerial student being like, I hope she asks me this month if I'm ready. How do you determine if people are ready? Like, how do you just know from the culture?
Yeah, I just know because I'm around my own studio and I see them training and I see where they're at, and I'll see them at open gym, see who's coming a lot, see who isn't,
Cool.
See who seems to have the fire.
Yeah, for sure.
Who wants it. And if they seem like they want it, and if they seem like they're ready, I'll put them on stage.
Heck yeah.
Next to me and my funky rope improvs, and next to Sochi and her beautiful dance trapeze
and her and
lines
and gorgeousness.
You
never
for
know
sure. What you're gonna get. And I'll just put a little Facebook invite together. We do hardly any advertising. We have some flyers. We usually have some flyers sitting around various places around town. That's basically it. And then I'll send out an email a couple days before asking people for their music, asking them for their rigging needs, asking them if they need me to bring anything from the studio for them or if they're going to bring their own equipment and stuff. And then we go. We all show up at the space and
have a party.
We do the thing.
Sweet. That's awesome.
Thing.
I love it. I love that. What was your experience setting up a studio?
Oh, it's happened in a really funny way. I had moved to New Orleans. There were no other professional aerialists there. There was zero. There were some people who were sort of hobbyists or recreational aerialists who had some really unsafe practices going on. I found this little space that was a stunt gym. These stunt dudes had this little gym, and I said, hey, can I hang my rope over here? Do a little thing. And they sort of reluctantly said yes, and I started training there. And then after a while, I had a couple students, and then I had a couple more students. And eventually, the tax credits in Louisiana hit their cap, and the stunt guys decided they were going to move here to Atlanta. And they had some time left on their lease, and they said, do you want to just take over this space? And I did some really quick math and sort of panicked, and then I took my tax return and got an LLC and bought some more equipment. And that's how I started a studio with no plan and no money.
Wow.
Completely on accident. But at that point, I'd been teaching for almost a decade, so I knew how to do it. I knew what went into it. I was on staff at Versatile Arts right after it opened, so I sort of watched the process of that unfold, and I had Bev in my corner. I had a lot of what would Bev do moments. She knows this.
Beverly Sobelman. I always say her name wrong. Sobelman. Yeah. Sorry, Beverly, if you're listening. She's not listening.
I had a lot of what would Bev do moments, and I sort of got my business lady hat on and figured out how to make it work. And we had quite a few challenges. We lost that space 6 months later. We got another space because I decided to keep it going. We got another space. We ended up with a terrible landlord who let the building just basically be a slum, and that was awful.
Cool.
I know, cool.
I love a good slumlord.
And then just recently in December, I moved us into a new space that's super duper great.
Yay!
So third time's the charm, and I'm thinking, we'll do well this year. We're doing a whole bunch of stuff. We're performing at Jazz Fest.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I got asked to make a circus show at Jazz Fest.
Oh, awesome.
Which I'm about to do. We got asked to do a project with the opera where they're doing an evening of opera songs with circus acts, like paired with circus acts, like an evening.
Cool.
That's going to be hella cool. They just handed me a huge check for that
Nice.
I now have to use to make a show. And I'm going to London later on this year to perform at the Byline Festival. They asked me to curate a show for this festival. It's sort of like a South by Southwest kind of thing, but it's in support of independent journalism. John Cleese is headlining. He's no big deal. I don't know if you've heard of him.
John who?
And I'm putting together a company of performers from 6 different countries. The International Ontological Circus Company will be making their debut at the Byline Festival in London in August.
Super. How are you going to have rehearsals? Are you going to Skype in rehearsals? Or how are you guys doing that?
We're going to use a lot of technology, and then we're going to meet up in London a couple weeks before the festival.
That's so great. How did you get contacted to do that in London?
It was super random. I met one of the producers when I was on holiday in Amsterdam last year. And
there you go.
He happened to be producing a show that another friend of mine was in. And I spent an evening with them, and we had some wonderful chats. And he said, well, I'm going to bring you to London. I'm going to do a thing.
And you're like, yeah,
and
sure you are,
yes,
buddy.
okay,
Here, yeah.
Whatever. And then lo and behold, a couple of months ago, I get this email.
I love that.
From this,
love it when
from
it
this
works
homie
out like that.
who's like, hey, I'm so-and-so's co-producer. Can we have a phone meeting?
Yeah.
We're bringing you for this thing. I was like, yeah, of course. Yes. Right. You are. You said that. I knew it was going to be true.
And when you're away, do you have like a team in place, or who runs your studio?
Yeah, I have Glenna Broderick, who is my...
I know.
Yeah, she's my homegirl. She's my right hand. I couldn't do any of it without her. So she's sort of in charge over there. And
how many teachers do you have now?
Oh gosh, we've got Glenna, Rebecca Chen, Katie Frady, Crosby Sandoval. That's pretty much the team that I've got in place over there. Who am I forgetting? No one else is teaching any classes, are they? Sarah Wagner. Yeah.
The girl makes a mean berry pie, Sarah Wagner.
Yeah, you're right.
She does.
So we have a great little team, I think.
Cool. That's great. And so you just say, I'm going to London to choreograph this thing.
Glenna's coming with me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So the kids are going to have to fend for themselves. But, it's pretty straightforward. We have a Google Cal. We put our stuff on the Google Cal, the website. People order stuff online, and everything is kind of like pretty cut and dried. They know when they got to show up for their classes. They know how to communicate with their students. They know how to communicate with me.
And how long do you think it took until... Because I meet so many studio owners who are like, I can't leave. I can't do this. I'm in here all the time. How long did it take for you to get to the point where you could just let your business do its thing?
I actually left right away. Right after I took over the space from those stunt guys, I was already contracted to go and work at CIRCUS that summer. So I took over the space and immediately left for CIRCUS for 6 weeks. And left it alone, and I came back, and the building hadn't burned down, and no one had gotten injured. So I thought, I guess this will work out.
Sweet.
That's dope. Yeah.
Check. That's awesome. So what does your day-to-day life look like now as a choreographer / aerialist / business owner / I already said choreographer. I think I don't have too many
and
beers.
A mother.
And a mother. And a human being also who like does human stuff.
Sometimes I do human stuff. I don't know, ask my friend.
When necessary, yeah. What is a day in the life of Liza Rose?
I'm up at about 6 o'clock. I gotta get my kid to school.
How old is
He's 11.
He 11.
Yeah.
Cute.
5th grade. 3 days a week, I actually work at a charter school in New Orleans teaching circus to kids.
Nice.
So I'm there half days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. No, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There's so much. It feels like so much. I go to the studio in the evenings, and I teach and I train. Mondays, I'm at the studio all day. Fridays, I'm at the studio all day. And during that time, I'll have like blocks of time where it's like 3 or 4 hours where I'm training, and then my students will come in, and I'll have like 6 private lessons in a row.
Sure, yeah. Nice.
Saturdays I train, Sundays I train. So it's like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday are my good training days. It's kind of how I break it down, and in between all of that stuff is picking up kid from school and doing homework and making dinner and doing mom things and taking my dogs for walks and
nice people stuff,
trying to buy groceries, whatever it is.
Maybe some laundry here and there.
I do. Yeah,
totally. So one of the reasons I started this podcast was because when I decided to be a circus artist, I didn't know any circus artists. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that world looked like. I was just like, I'm going to do this. It sounds cool. And I really wish that I had had someone to tell me what it was going to be like. And to listen to the stories of people who have gone through it or who are doing things in it now. So one of the questions that I wrote down was, what advice would you give to yourself, you Liza Rose, now at the very beginning of all of this circus madness?
I would I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this.
Oh yeah, say it. Say it.
I would have made myself try harder to get into circus school.
Interesting.
I never went to circus school, and I feel like I still have achieved a level of technical mastery that I am happy with. I'm still moving and learning and getting better every day, and I will be, I hope, till the day that I quit circus for whatever reason. I hope to never stop moving forward and improving. But I wish that I would have gone to circus school just for the connections, just for the head start it gives you.
Sure.
Because it does a lot. Because there's no way that I could have ever, had I wanted to go and work for Cirque du Soleil, there's pretty much no way I could have gotten into that without having gone to circus school, or had I wanted to work for one of the bigger companies.
Sure. I mean, it sounds like you're pretty good at just randomly meeting producers in Amsterdam. So.
Yeah.
You got those connections
that
somehow.
Happened. I mean, it's fine, but it would have been a lot easier for me had I gone through that. Had I gone that route.
Yeah, for sure.
I actually don't feel like I got worse training.
Yeah.
Because I managed to, on my way, find such wonderful, supportive artists and teachers. And I've trained with some really incredible people. And because of my background as a gymnast and a dancer, I sort of had, when I first started doing trapeze, they were like, I remember my teacher being like, this Russian guy in New York being like, okay, don't be upset if you don't get this trick the first time. It took me like months to get this, and you just don't be mad at yourself. Don't beat yourself up. It takes some time. It's got to whatever. Big disclaimer. It's called a pullover. And I was like, I learned that when I was 6 in gymnastics. So what else you got? In my trajectory to becoming an aerialist wasn't the same.
Right.
Because I already sort of had like this really.
Whereas I was the little fatty over in the corner, like, I can't even get up on the bar. What is this? I'm an actor. Yeah.
It was.
I'm always jealous of all of you guys.
But if at that point I would have turned around and auditioned for, ENC or I looked into going to Circlemania at the time because they were one of the only things out there. ENC was, this was a million years ago. It was like
ENC, 3 years ago. No, she's done this on 3 years.
ENC was very small back then.
Right.
It was like 2002, 2003. And I didn't even know about them because the internet wasn't even like a thing. The only school that popped up when I Googled circus schools was Circlemedia. They were the only ones. But I wish I had gone for it. I wish I had tried harder. I wish I had said, you know what, I can do this and push myself and found the money and gotten my ass to those auditions and done the thing. But I didn't at the time because I just sort of thought I don't know what I thought. I thought I couldn't, I had too much self-doubt, or I thought, I haven't been groomed for this, or I thought I don't have the money for this. I just got done with undergrad and was like, am I really going to go back to school again? And I didn't realize I was already dancing for a company in New York, and I just stayed.
Cool. Oh, I have one more question that I really want to ask, but it's like a selfish question, and it may not even be it's going to be because it is. But you worked for Zoe Keating?
Did work with Zoe Keating, yeah.
So I love her work. And a ton of people do numbers to her.
It's a funny piece. Story, yeah.
But yeah, will you tell me? Because here's the whole when story. I went to NECA, my graduation piece was to The Optimist, one of her songs. And I just love her work. So I was like,
do you know the story of that song?
No. Oh my God, tell me the story.
She wrote that song, Optimist, while she was pregnant with her son. It's a love song to her unborn baby.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
My piece was not about being pregnant.
Well, that's okay. So the way that I ended up performing with Zoe, and this is an example. This is a good story for it, and sort of encapsulating my personality. And I made a trapeze piece to her composition Sun Will Set. I made it to perform it in a variety show in Seattle called Circus of Dreams. That was a benefit for pediatric brain cancer.
Amazing.
I made it 4 days before the show because I was like, oh crap, I said I would do this show and I have nothing. And I called it Studio Morning because the piece literally started with me walking in with all my clothes and my street clothes and my shoes and my bag and everything, and just putting everything down and looking at the trapeze and jumping up on the thing. And the choreography actually came from my warm-up exercises.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's so cool.
And
just like what you're talking about. You're out there moving. And
it was very meta. I made that.
This whole podcast has been very meta. This whole episode.
I made that piece, and then I heard that Zoe Keating was going on tour, and I started Twitter stalking her. I would get an alert every time she would send a tweet, and every time she would send a tweet, I would reply to her and send her a video of my trapeze piece and say, hey, I think you need to bring an aerialist on your tour.
That is genius.
And one day her assistant emailed me and said, hey, we love your video. Do you want to perform?
That's genius.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's that kind of like crazy tenacity, I feel like, that it takes to get that kind of stuff done.
Yeah,
Which I love because I feel like so many aerialists have that. You have to be able to
you gotta have
get anywhere.
Yeah, I'm nothing if not intrepid.
Love it.
And you have to make your own opportunities. That's the only other piece of advice I would give myself if I could go back in time. Is just say, get ready for 15 years of making your own opportunities. Because you're not going to fit in anybody's concept of what they think a circus artist is supposed to be.
Yes, you are the circus artist that you are supposed to be.
I am my own it girl.
Yes, it girl. Well, thank you, Liza Rose, it girl, for coming on the show today. It was a pleasure to have you. Yay! That was my interview with Liza Rose. Isn't she just as sweet as she wants to be? Love that girl. So I have a couple of thoughts about our interview. The first is about how Liza Rose talked about her methods for finding authentic movement and sharing that with her students. So often I find in aerial classes that there are students who just want to learn tricks, and there are teachers who just want to teach tricks. And that's fine, because usually a routine or a number, an act, is made up of tricks. But Liza Rose has a very different approach, because for her, and I think when you start to delve deeper into the world of aerials or really into any circus act, it's not about the tricks anymore. It's about who you are and how you as an artist are creating those tricks and those transitions and those moments of connection with the audience and with yourself. So I was really impressed, because I think it takes a really seasoned coach to have the confidence to start with their beginner students and to teach really basic tricks, but also give students the tools to find their own means of expression. I also really loved how Liza Rose talked about making her own success with just sheer tenacity. I threw the last question about Zoe Keating in. If you guys don't know, Zoe Keating is an avant-garde cellist. She makes beautiful music. You can check her out wherever music is downloaded. And I'm really happy I asked Liza this question, because it allowed her to tell this story about relentlessly, creepily stalking Zoe Keating on Twitter until she got noticed. And that's an example of the kind of stuff that you really have to do sometimes to get noticed or to get places in the industry. It's that kind of stuff that not only keeps you training until you reach a high technical level after failing over and over again at tricks and skills and transitions, but you also need that tenacity when you're filming new material, when you're going to auditions, when you're sending out emails to producers or shows or putting stuff on YouTube and not having responses for months, maybe even years. Sometimes that's what it takes to succeed, is a little bit of crazy. So if you have it, don't give up. Thank you guys so much for listening. Next week on the show, I have Brandon Terrence Levanis, who is an acrobat on Cirque du Soleil's show Volta. And he's got a great accent, so stay tuned for that. If you liked the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And to get in touch with me, you can visit me on my website, www.theartistathlete.com. See you next week, guys.